million buys on April 1st, 2007. The most bought WWE show of all time. Why was it such a success?
Donald Trump and Vince McMahon's hair. And that's what it was. It was, Donald Trump was a big-time celebrity, and even though he couldn't do a wrestling match and he wasn't in the match, Donald Trump's hair is a topic of conversations, and Vince McMahon is Vince McMahon larger than life. I think if Donald and Vince was the main event in a hair match, I don't think it would have done that well, because people would just go, it's whatever. Because Vince's big matches never did the giant business. But the idea of their hair at stake, and let's face it, the two guys who were in that match, who were both being pushed at the time, the fact is that neither of them ever were in a stage like that again for the rest of their life. It wasn't like, the idea was absolutely to make Bobby Lashley, and Bobby Lashley was a Vince McMahon handpicked guy, and Umaga was, in a great wrestling family. I think Umaga was probably the best wrestler, bell to bell, of anyone in that family. I thought that guy was just tremendous. But, Umaga's job was to put Bobby Lashley over. And Donald Trump, the idea is what we're going to do with Donald Trump is he's going to endorse Bobby Lashley, so Bobby Lashley gets the win on a big stage, and then we go with Bobby Lashley as this big thing. So we get some benefit past the point in, we're going to do a big buy rate, but we're also going to make a new star off of this program. It all made perfect sense. But the idea that Vince was going to get his head shaved, and because I don't think anyone really believed that Trump was going to lose. So Vince is going to get his head shaved, and probably by Austin, because Austin was the referee, and I think they kind of teased that. I think that there was, that was something really momentous. And it was they've had all kinds of big WrestleManias, and I'm not saying it's bigger than Hogan and Andre, because it was a different time and there weren't as many homes of the pay-per-view. But modern era-wise, it was the biggest that they ever got.
Certainly was. And to Lashley, and to our discussion last week about bodies and Vince McMahon's predilection for guys with impressive physiques, is that really all there is to what they saw in pushing Bobby Lashley this way? He flamed out pretty dramatically, though certainly a great athlete with a lot of cool attributes. Not much more going on, Dave, though, as far as depth as a potential main eventer than just the physique.
He had an incredible physique. He had, of all the guys, if you think about it, except for, maybe a young Tony Atlas, and maybe not even him. Bobby Lashley just was so big and so cut. And John Cena, who had great physiques, I don't think that their physiques compared to Bobby Lashley. The problem with Bobby Lashley was that he was not a good promo. And as a wrestler, he was okay. For the length of time he had in the business when they pushed him, I actually think he was kind of good. But, I remember the whole Bobby Lashley story. When the first time I saw Bobby Lashley on OVW television, Blaster Lashley, and he was just gigantic. I was just like, whoa, my God. And I remember talking to people there, and it was just like, and he was so green. He was so green, and they did a gimmick where he would only do 1-minute matches in OVW on television because he couldn't do anything else. He was so green. But boy, did he look, the physique was just incredible. And the whole thing was just, we got to hide this guy from Vince. We got to hide this guy from Vince. And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, Vince sees this guy. He's going to want him on the main roster tomorrow, and he's so green. He's not ready. So they hit him as long as they could, but then Vince saw him, and then Vince brought him up way too soon. And if you remember, so Vince puts him in there with, and they understand that he's not ready, so Vince puts him in there with Finlay, but he wants, and Finlay's the great on-the-job coach, player coach, great trainer, but, they want Finlay to get this guy ready to be Superman in 6 months. And it just, if it was Kurt Angle, it would have worked, but Bobby Lashley's not Kurt Angle. It's like everyone's different. I always wonder if Bobby Lashley wasn't so rushed, maybe it would have been different. But at the same time, I don't know that Bobby Lashley ever would have been a great promo. And that's so important in being a wrestler. And aside from the body, I don't know that Bobby Lashley has super charisma. He's a good athlete. He was a decent enough worker that he wasn't bad. But after the program here with the Trump match, Bobby was in a spotlight, and then afterwards they really tried to shoot him high. And I remember with Bobby Lashley had a match with John Cena on a pay-per-view. In fact, it was the first pay-per-view after the Chris Benoit thing, and they did really well. was like it wasn't like Bobby was a failure, but then Bobby hurt his shoulder, and once he hurt his shoulder, he took time off for the bad shoulder, and they got really mad because we've invested so much in you, and why did you have surgery now? And their feeling was, I mean, look at what his body looked like. So therefore, how bad could it really be hurting? Well, it probably was hurting bad, but in their mind, you can gut your way through it. And he at one point just goes, "I'm getting surgery." And when he got the surgery, I think that there was a lot of bad feelings, and he never came back because that was when he had the issue with Michael Hayes, and he wanted his release.
Absolutely. This show also sees a match that prompts a discussion point. It's not a particularly significant match on this show, but it gives me the opportunity to ask you about an interesting move WWE made around this point in time. It's the ECW Originals of Rob Van Dam, Tommy Dreamer, Sabu, and the Sandman facing the New Breed over on the ECW show that they had launched on Tuesday nights on Sci-Fi. Elijah Burke, Marcus Corvan, Matt Stryker, and Kevin Thorne. There's a few guys you probably haven't thought of in a while. They had in June 05, they did a pay-per-view called ECW One Night Stand in the true blue ECW aesthetic with all the original guys coming back, and they decided, Dave, to actually launch ECW as its own separate television show with its own separate roster. Tell the listeners, why was this brought back? It's so odd to watch this show and see this ECW storyline presented in the middle of the WWE program. Why the ECW idea and the resurrection?
The first One Night Stand was a gigantic success. The second one wasn't as big a success, but the first one, I don't think they were ready for it. I don't know that anyone was ready for it. I think that there was always the mentality that ECW had very, very fervent fans, but there weren't that many of them. And they made a lot of noise, and they were big on the internet, but there's just not that many of them. So they do a One Night Stand, and it did so much better than they expected that it was such a successful show. I mean, the matches weren't necessarily the greatest, but as a show from start to finish, I thought it was one of the best pay-per-views I ever saw. I would put it up there, not match quality wise, but just as a one night show. It was incredible. The announcing, Joey Styles was just so great that night. And as I recall, he didn't even, they had to talk him into doing it. And it ended up, they got him his WWE job, didn't it?
It did, and they handed the reins over to Paul Heyman to actually put the show together in the true spirit of things, and that made all the difference as well.
Well, if anyone else had done it, it would have been an absolute travesty.
As it went on to be.
Yeah, but even with Paul, and then after Paul, even more, right? So the next year, after that big success, and they didn't capitalize on it at all. I thought, like, after that ECW One Night Stand, I thought this thing is so hot. We're gonna, they need to, I thought they could have started the brand from that, but they weren't ready for it. And then they really pretended it never happened. I mean, I just thought the selling of ECW T-shirts would have been incredible, but it just, whatever it was, they weren't ready. They didn't follow up. So a year later, now they're ready. They do the One Night Stand again. It's not nearly as hot as the first year. Then they start the thing, and the original TV show. At first, the ratings were incredibly strong for the ECW TV show, but they collapsed so quickly, and it was just the whole thing of people wanted to see this thing, and it became, it went from ECW back to third-rate WWE brand Sunday Night Heat television, and with guys that whatever, they didn't have the edge, they couldn't do what they did before. And it just was, and everyone could see it dying in front of your eyes, and that's never fun to watch. And that's what happened. It did, they went on tour, and they didn't really draw on tour, and they were on TV, and the TV shows weren't very good, and it wasn't authentic, and people had their idea, both romantic and just realistic, of what they thought ECW should be, and it was neither of those things. And it was. If you were an ECW fan, it was actually painful to watch. And even if you weren't, you still had the feeling of, boy, this thing's flopping from very early on in the run.
We talked earlier about how successful the Money in the Bank ladder match was as part of the WrestleMania presentation. This year, WrestleMania 23, they put over Mr. Kennedy in the match, and there were big plans for this young talent, and Ken Anderson, and he would be much like Lashley in that, the writing was on the wall, that they were ready for a very significant push for this guy, and he hurts himself, and that's it. Can you talk about what seems to be a trend forming around this late 2000s period for the WWE, where they decide on a guy and then just one faux pas later, it's over?
Well, with Ken Anderson, I mean, there were a couple of things that happened with him, and I don't remember the exact order of all of them, but there was the one, and I mean, the one he got injured, and I think it was a tricep. I'm not positive if it's a tricep or a bicep, but I think it was a tricep. But he was told it was a tear, and that he would be out for 6 months. So he was the Money in the Bank guy, and how do we get out of this? So they had Edge beat him in a match for the Money in the Bank, and then he was going to go and have his surgery, and then he was going to be gone, and that would happen. Comes to find out, the injury was misdiagnosed, and he did have an injury, and he was out for a little while, but then he's back. And losing that, being the first guy to win Money in the Bank, and not cash in, even though he didn't lose the match, it tagged him as kind of a failure. So I don't think that hurt. And then he had other injuries that slowed him down a lot. A few of the guys didn't like to work with him. He rubbed some people the wrong way. The thing with the Chris Benoit thing, he was an embarrassment to the company. There was he had asked in the wake of Chris Benoit, when the WWE is getting slammed in publicity wise, he asked, "Let me go on. I want to defend the company." So he goes on and about how the steroid testing is foolproof and this and this and this, and just really like, I don't do steroids. I did. I mean, he said I did, but I do not anymore. And it's impossible to beat these tests. And then, what was it? A month or two later, the Signature Pharmacy investigation comes in, and there's a list of 13 or so WWE guys that were doing steroids long after the testing began, and were somehow beating the test. However, who knows? And there's Ken Anderson's name on that list after going on TV, and I think that really embarrassed the company, and he was never the same after that. They never looked at him the same. If you remember, there was a point where, and I'm trying to remember how this happened. I don't remember if it was an injury, but what was the deal? Because he was going to get that one big push when he was going to be,
he's going to be a relative of Vince's. He was going to be
Vince McMahon's illegitimate son. He was going to be Ken Kennedy McMahon.
Right.
And he was going to be, and probably world champion. And what did he did something wrong right before it, and they switched it to Hornswoggle, and I can't remember off the top of my head what it was.
Yeah, well, didn't he hurt Randy Orton? Did he concuss Randy Orton on Raw?
I think that was, I don't remember if that was before or later.
Yeah, but it was some kind of thing that wasn't evident to the viewing audience. It was backstage stuff, and suddenly this guy, no longer is a hand in the deck, and pretty soon he's gone altogether.
Yeah, well, what I remember is on the show, and I think this was the Stan Kroenke show, if the word that show.
Oh yeah, Denver, yeah.
Where I think he came back from an injury, and he back suplexed Randy Orton on Randy Orton's bad shoulder, and Randy Orton flipped out on him, and then John Cena backed up Randy Orton, and they fired Ken Anderson for that. So that was his being done in, but he had a couple of injuries. He had the Benoit thing, and there's whatever the thing was, and I can't remember off the top of my head, that caused him to be pulled from the Ken Kennedy McMahon role. Mm-hmm. And that's your story on a guy who was going to be, he was going to be world champion, and then he was going to be, if you're Ken Kennedy McMahon, he was going to be almost a Triple H.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It mentions here in his Wikipedia entry that the angle was written because Kennedy being named one of the 11 superstars in the steroid scandal, was suspended for 30 days. They talk about how that's kind of the reason the name Kennedy was picked, because, of course, he came in as Anderson. And they gave him Kennedy with this longer range idea of having him related to Vince.
Well, no, actually, that's not. They didn't have that originally. The Kennedy idea was actually a genius idea of Paul Heyman. Because Paul Heyman and Ken Anderson were very close from OVW, and Heyman, gave him the Mr. Anderson,
right,
which still does to this day, and probably is the only reason he ever made it to the big roster, because that gimmick got over in everywhere it ever went, and they didn't want him, so he comes up, and his name is, I guess Anderson. This is not during the period where everyone has to have a fake name. And so he was using the Ken Anderson name. I think that his real last name is Ken. God damn, what is it? But Anderson's his mother's name.
Oh.
But he for whatever reason, I don't think he got along with his father, and so he was always Ken Anderson. Like when he started wrestling, he was Ken Anderson. So he was always Ken Anderson. He was Ken Anderson Developmental, and at that time they weren't changing people's name. So he comes up to the main roster, Mr. Anderson. They liked him. They wanted to give him a push, and Vince McMahon just goes, "I hate Ole Anderson." That's it. You got to get a new name. I hate Ole Anderson.
There you go.
So it goes to Heyman, and they come up with these different ideas. And I don't know who it was. I don't know if it was Anderson or Heyman. And but it was a conversation between the two of them. And somehow they float around some name Kennedy, and the other, and Heyman goes, so it may have been Anderson, and but I'm not sure. But it just goes, oh my.
Okay, this is the retirement match of the Nature Boy, Ric Flair, one of, if not the greatest professional wrestler of all time. And I remember before this match, you wrote a great piece in The Observer, and it led with a quote from I Did It My Way, So I Faced the Final Curtain by Frank Sinatra. And you really treated it like this is the retirement match, even if, there was the chance and the likelihood, in fact, in terms of wrestling, that Flair would wrestle again. You gave it that treatment of, okay, let's sort of pretend, and let's look back at Ric Flair's career, and it was a fantastic piece. Did it feel like it was going to be a shoot retirement more than others back then that week?
Well, I mean, Rick had probably retired several times before.
That's what I mean.
Well, here's the thing. Vince was absolutely adamant about it. And at the time, I really, the relations with Rick and Vince were so good that I just didn't see mentally the idea that Rick would go anywhere else. As it turned out, Rick was gone from WWE within a couple of months of that match. I thought that Rick was there for life as an ambassador. Everything looked so big. They gave him the big retirement. The idea was, I remember all the way through, it's like, we're going to go through this big storyline, and you're going to be bigger than ever as a retired guy, and you're going to be public relations guy, and you're going to make big appearances on Raw and be a bigger star than ever. You're going to be if you remember, Hulk Hogan was on the outs at this point with them. So it's like, Hulk's gone and he's never coming back, that story, but that's what they thought. So you're Babe Ruth. You're going to be the guy. And it sounded great. When that match happened, I knew that Rick never wanted to retire, and if he had his way, he would probably be wrestling right now. But I thought that because Vince was going to hold to that stip, which that there was a real good chance it would be his last match, and they weren't happy that it wasn't. But
right, because it wouldn't be, to be clear, that next match wouldn't be in the WWE ring. It would be over in TNA, where he had a falling out.
If I remember, the next run was the Australia tour
with Hogan.
TNA.
Yeah, with Hogan. Mm-hmm.
And then TNA, and then after TNA, God, I don't remember if did he ever wrestle a match after TNA?
No, he didn't do any matches in Ring of Honor, and he certainly didn't do any in WWE, and that was his two more stops along the way back to the company.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, what his last match. It's funny because, the Shawn Michaels match is his last match, is very memorable.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't even know off the top of my head what his last match was. I don't know if it was...
It was the Foley match. It was when he had the Foley table match on Impact. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Wow. Okay, so him and Foley both had the same last match?
I believe so, yeah.
Wow.
Could be mistaken.
Well, because I know Foley was... I'm trying to remember if Foley did another one. I just remember that I talked to Foley 2 days after that match. And Foley knew going in it could be his last match. He didn't know if it would be. And then when it was over, it was kind of like he still didn't know if it was going to be his last match. But I remember him telling me, he's like, if this is my last match, I'm very happy. Because it could have been, it's at least something. And with Rick, that may have been Rick's last match, too.
Now, what did you think of the execution here? They had this idea of Shawn sort of doing a mercy kill of Ric Flair, where he's just saying, come on, give me what you got left, but Flair's clearly on the ropes. Michael mouths the phrase, I love you, and then kicks him in the head and pins him. What did you think of the execution of this?
They tried to tell a compelling story. I think that they pretty much did. A lot of people really loved that match, I guess because, if you wanted to cry, I'd let you cry. I guess because it was Rick's last match, and I've seen so many Ric Flair matches, probably, maybe more matches with him than any wrestler ever. Yeah. I think over the course of the years, because so many years. I knew that on certain days he was able to turn it back, like he had a Triple H match in Greensboro, which had a terrible finish, but it was a really good match, and I mean, it still boggles my mind that Ric Flair's retirement match in Greensboro, they had to do some wicked DQ because William Regal interfered to set up a Triple H William Regal 3-minute match on Raw, and Triple H, telling everyone, you got to see the big picture. You got to see the big picture. It's like the big picture is that Ric Flair should have beat you in his last match in Greensboro. but because the gimmick was Rick was beating everybody. He beat Randy Orton. He beat Randy Orton, but he never got a championship match. I think they could have given him a championship match. If you remember that whole retirement thing, this whole retirement thing was Steve Austin's idea. I don't know if you know that.
The retirement tour?
The retirement tour. I mean, I think they wanted a retirement. I don't know why Austin was involved or anything, but Steve Austin had this idea. Well, why don't we have a thing where Ric Flair is told that, and I think that with Austin's idea, it wasn't Vince McMahon forcing it on him. Like the next time you lose, you're gone. You're retired. It was going to be Ric Flair quest for the world championship. And
saying next match I lose, I'll retire out of personal pride, and that builds the drama for him winning every match.
In every match, and then he finally goes at WrestleMania for the world championship, and then he loses. I mean, that was the idea. Or and as it was presented to me, or he wins if it's going really good, and then but he still has the next match I lose, I retire, right? So as long as the momentum is strong, he's not retired, but there comes a time where he's going to lose that championship, and then, in fact, he does retire. And as that was laid out to me when this whole thing started, I thought, this is really great, because he's going to be, he's going to have 6 months of wins leading to a championship match. They completely botched it up. They started doing DQs. They started just not having him wrestle. I just remember that whole thing, and it just fell off the rails. But, I mean, there were some, there were a few somewhat memorable moments in it, but the original idea was so much better than what they did. So there you go. And I mean, I think it could have been something if and the idea was Randy Orton as champion. So if Rick goes for the world title against let's just say Randy Orton, and wins it when everyone thinks he's going to lose it at that WrestleMania stage, that would be phenomenal. Or he loses it. And then that would be good in another way.
So the dynamic clearly was that Flair was being told to retire. He did not want to retire.
Yeah, I mean that's what it was. And they were just trying to find a nice way to end his career. Yeah.
And then the next night on Raw, they do one of the more memorable segments of Raw history, where they bring out the cast of the original Four Horsemen, sort of surprise Flair in an emotional closing scene. Your memories of that send-off for the Nature Boy?
I personally think that was the greatest segment in the history of professional wrestling from any company ever. I remember telling some people, I remember that night I emailed someone who was in the ring, and I go, this was the greatest moment in the history of wrestling. I go, imagine being in the ring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's just like, and it's not Rick. And I mean, and Rick the same way. And, I don't know how much people know, but Rick did not know who was coming out. And he did not know what was being done. I mean, that was like, that whole thing was like, I don't want to say unscripted because it was scripted by somebody, but it was unknown to anybody, except for those guys who were there. Nobody knew what was going to happen except for probably, Vince and a couple of people.
Yeah, certainly not Rick, who sees all these, this is your life kind of a parade of guys who have meant so much to him just suddenly show up without him even expecting it.
Yeah. Oh, it was just an incredible. I think it was the greatest moment in the history of Raw.
Oh.
And maybe wrestling, I mean, as far as non-match segment in the history of wrestling, maybe the best ever.
This WrestleMania also sees the WrestleMania debut of one CM Punk, who wins the Money in the Bank ladder match and goes on to cash. Tell us about CM Punk's reputation coming into the WWE, and if you pegged him for achieving the heights that he did.
Well, the answer to that one is no. I did peg him to make the roster, and then I figured that the walls would come crumbling down on him. I thought that his confidence would rub people the wrong way because they would go, the whole Sin Cara thing. I guess to give the example, that he would come in, and because he knew he was good, and they would go, you were good in Ring of Honor, and that means nothing here, that they would just go, he thinks he's good, and he's a minor leaguer, and it would just destroy him. He'd be, everybody would be out to get him. And that probably wasn't far from the truth, but he survived it because at the end of the day, the guy was a fantastic talker and still is. He won the Money in the Bank. He won the championship. He wasn't really treated as champion. Like when he was champion the first time, it was very much it wasn't like he was the focal point of the company. He had a belt, and the belt actually meant less than usual. So it was almost like the win as champion didn't really count the first time in some ways. But, again, CM Punk really made himself in 2011, and then
we'll certainly talk about him more in weeks to come. I should insert a quick correction here. This was sort of CM Punk's first moment at WrestleMania. He actually debuted the year before in the Money in the Bank ladder match that year in 2007. Came back to win this year. Well, we can't talk about this WrestleMania, Dave, without talking about Floyd Money Mayweather, who the WWE gathered together, scrounged together substantial resources to bring in to work with the Big Show in a straight pro wrestling match. Floyd taking some bumps, doing a traditional match, going over. Why did they sign Floyd? How much did they pay him? What was the idea?
I think the money ended up being about $2 million, although they said $20 million. But I mean, as far as the idea was a tag team match, and it was I think it was
Floyd and Ray versus Big Show and Shane.
Later, originally it was Oscar De La Hoya and Ray.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Against Shane and Floyd.
That's right.
And then Oscar turned it down because that was the original idea was for Floyd to be the heel, because Oscar and Floyd had just done the boxing match that was the biggest pay-per-view of all time. So, that was they just done the biggest pay-per-view of all time by leaps and bounds. They had done those specials on HBO that everybody watched. They were household names. And, they just, and whatever, Oscar did not want to do pro wrestling. So he's out of the question. So then it becomes Floyd and Ray against Big Show and Shane. And then Ray tears Spice up, I think, right before the program starts. So Floyd's supposed to be a baby face, and even with Ray, the idea is that Ray makes him a baby face. The crowd is completely hating Floyd throughout this whole thing, and then Ray gets hurt right away, so Ray's out of the question. So they go with the singles match, and they try to push Floyd as a baby face. Now the first TV, as I recall, it's LA, right? Or one of the first TVs. So he's booed out of the place, and they're going, well, Oscar De La Hoya is from LA. Of course he's booed. So the next week they go to Vegas. Okay, this is when we're really going to kick it off. He's going to be in Vegas, his hometown, and they all boo him. So then it's like, well, I guess Big Show's the babyface. So they flip flop on the program, and they go with Floyd as the heel and Big Show as the babyface. And I mean, to their credit, for a guy, I mean, you had a lot of things going against you. You had a heel who's 1/3 the size of your babyface, which is difficult. You have a heel who has never done a match in WrestleMania, which is mind-boggling. And the Big Show, for as talented as he is, and he is talented, he's not exactly the guy I would put to carry a novice to a match at WrestleMania. Right. But I mean, Floyd was fantastic through the whole build. Floyd's it's no joke why that guy can draw. He was great all the way through as a heel, and I don't really think, honestly, like if and no one will ever be able to prove this. I mean, they did. I think it was 1,041,000 buys, I think was the number. I don't know that Floyd added that much, because I really think Rick's retirement was going to be really big, plus the rest of the card that they had. I really think that they were probably going to do in that number anyway, so I don't think he really added too much. I mean, he gave them some publicity that they wouldn't have gotten, some talk show stuff late that probably helped a little bit, but and I know they advertised the whole show around Floyd, especially mainstream, but I'm still not sure that he delivered like the kind of added buys that like The Rock and Donald Trump delivered. In fact, I just don't buy that he did.
Do you think it hurt Show to not go over in this match, or to, I shouldn't put it that way, I wouldn't expect Mayweather to job, but to be pinned clean by Floyd Mayweather?
Well, it's a big show, you know what I mean? I mean, he was already past that level to where it really mattered. I mean, this was more of a revitalization of him as opposed to, if they took somebody who was super, super, super hot heel, that they, like let's say it was Rusev this year, and they brought him to Floyd, and then Floyd beats him, I would say that was probably not a good idea. With Big Show, I don't really know that it mattered. I mean, it got him in the spotlight. He lost. Maybe that was part of the deal with Floyd that probably was. I know, I don't know if you know the story, but Mike Tyson was furious.
Was furious that Floyd won?
Oh, furious.
Really?
Oh, yeah, absolutely furious. Because Mike Tyson, loves pro wrestling and loves boxing, and he feels that, like, if Mike went in there, if Mike Tyson would have gone in there and he'd been in that match, he would demand it to lose. Because his feeling was that it's unfair for a novice to beat a guy in his own sport, because he doesn't believe that anyone would have walked in boxing to beat him. But if he goes in somebody else's sport, if it was real, it's like the whole Mike Tyson, Randy Couture argument from years and years and years ago, where people go, oh, if it was, Mike Tyson would knock out, he'd destroy Randy Couture. And Mike Tyson was always like, no, I mean, it's not my sport, it's his sport. Of course I would.
Well, it's a nice thing to say, Mike, but go ahead and do it. Why didn't you ever get in there and do the JOB?
Oh, Mike?
Yeah.
They never, the one time they did, I guess they never came to him with the money after they offered him $3.5 million the one time. I think they never offered him again. I mean, he did do that one tag match, if you remember, on Raw, which blew my mind. It's like, Mike Tyson's doing a pro wrestling match with no build. And he probably got paid like, $10,000 for it or something, or $20,000. And it's just like, if you like advertised Mike Tyson doing a pro wrestling match for 6 months for WrestleMania, I mean, it wouldn't mean as much now. I mean, when he did it, but it still mean more than like Raw with no build. This is friggin' insane.
Dave, I want to start talking, as far as this show goes, about Mickey Rourke, because I am fascinated by story. The wrestler comes out, it wins all kinds of critical acclaim, starring Mickey Rourke as, kind of the washed-up wrestler clinging to glory on the indie circuit. And so the WWE brings him in. It was just at the time that they were looking for celebrities for Mania. This has that nice synergy with the wrestler movie. Chris Jericho stands ready to turn kind of the storyline of the wrestler into something that could be a WrestleMania storyline. And the intention, right, is for Mickey Rourke to work a pro wrestling match against Chris Jericho, and we end up with him showing up with reinforcements by the time the show comes.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those great stories too, because originally Vince McMahon hated the movie The Wrestler, absolutely hated it. Then all of a sudden it's up for all these awards, and everyone's talking about how great it is, and he does a complete flip flop, and now he loves it.
Wow.
So he loves it, and he tries to make a deal to get Mickey in, and man, it makes perfect sense. And Jericho was probably the guy at the time. Jericho was a heel who could do the right promo, and you could trust him in the ring because he was maybe the best worker they had, or as far as carry job, maybe Shawn would have been better, but Shawn wouldn't have fit the role. But Jericho was one of the best wrestlers that they had, and a great talker, and in his prime, and Jericho was all full of confidence then. Not that he isn't now, but he was. So they go with the whole thing, and then the people would go like, if I guess something happened with Eddie Murphy, and I don't know know the whole story because
this is getting better. I didn't know the Eddie Murphy part.
Okay, something happened with Eddie Murphy years earlier where he did a movie where he could have won the Oscar, and he did something, and the Academy didn't like it, and he didn't win the Oscar. Okay, so, and I don't know what the whole story is, but that happened, and they told Mickey, remember what happened to Eddie Murphy? Mm-hmm. You go and do this thing; they're going to hold it against you, and you will not win the award. And he didn't win the award anyway, as I recall, right? Yeah, but we would have, you're not going to win the award, so you cannot do this. So Mickey basically, he's out. I mean, he's out for a while. And then finally, they keep talking and talking and talking, and they come to this idea that, okay, because he was out, he wasn't going to do the show at all. And then they come to a agreement where just come to the show, have him come in, he'll throw his punch and knock out Jericho. He didn't do the match. They were really desperate for it. He'll get the payday. We'll have a big celebrity. We'll have Mickey Rourke at WrestleMania, which they thought was going to really help the show. And so they kind of worked out that compromise. So everything's fine. Everything's well and good. Right around the same time, Chris Jericho is cut some promos. And he, I just remember that, and I don't remember what venue it was. Jericho wrote all about it in his book, but he cut one promo. And I remember watching the promo going like, Mickey's doing the match. Jericho would never do this promo if Mickey isn't doing the match. And it's like, but I know I've already been told Mickey's not doing the match. So I go, this is really weird. So come to find out that Chris Jericho's mentality is that I am going to get Mickey to do this match by this promo. I'm going to convince him to do this match because I'm going to do such a great promo. So Jericho's like working his own angle, which is why I got all confused because he would never do this. You never say this if he's not doing it.
And he thinks Mickey's going to pick up on it, get it.
He thinks that Mickey's going to get it, and that it's going to be so hot that Mickey's going to do it. Mickey, on the other hand,
it's a shoot.
Mickey thinks it's a shoot. So Mickey is like, oh my God, this guy's going to double cross me. So he brings Modi Hornstein, who did UFC, whatever number, I don't remember what number, and Frank Shamrock and Clint Coronel, who was, I think one of Frank Shamrock's buddies, who fought in MMA as well. So he brings these three guys to, it was Houston, right?
Yeah, this year was Houston, yeah.
It was Houston, Texas, and it was a week before the Frank Shamrock-Nick Diaz fight. Okay, so Frank is hey, you want to come to WrestleMania? It's like I never go to WrestleMania. It's like I went to the WrestleMania in Los Angeles, and then after that one, it's nothing against WrestleMania, and I'm going to go this year, but my vow was I will never go to another WrestleMania because I came home and I had to rewatch the show, and then now I'm so far behind in my busiest week of the year, and I just don't got the time to be flying to WrestleMania. So he's trying to talk me into going to WrestleMania, which I think is also kind of funny because if I had been the fourth guy.
You would have been the shooter?
I would have been the fourth. Well,
were you going to tape your fists, Dave? What were you going to do?
No, but I didn't know. Well, I knew why he was there, right. but it's like I knew why he was there, and I'm just thinking this is like, yeah, right. You know what I mean? It's like, it's Chris Jericho. It's like he ain't going to double cross him, and there's going to be no problems, and I don't know what this is all about. This is just silly, okay? I have Mickey's chair upstairs in my room.
The one he sat in that night?
Yes.
So the psychology of Mickey Rourke is, all right, I'm going to go to the show, I'm going to do this bit with Jericho where I punch him in the face, but his interviews make me think that he's going to try to double-cross me and take advantage of me, and if he tries to pull anything, I got Frank Shamrock right over there. Thank you.
I got Frank Shamrock and his two buddies, and there's going to be a war.
We thought wrestlers were paranoid, Dave.
So Mickey doesn't trust Mickey's watching his interviews all week, and Jericho is trying to talk it like it's a shoot. It's like
he confronted him on Larry King too. It wasn't just watching Raw; they were both on Larry King and Jericho.
When they were the Larry King interview was the one that convinced Mickey to bring in Shamrock.
Yeah,
that was the interview because he was just like, Chris did such a great job that Mickey absolutely bought it. Absolutely bought Jericho's book explains that whole thing.
Oh yeah.
It is one of the. I mean, you would almost need to get the book just to read those 2 pages. I mean, it's the greatest story ever. So Chris Jericho, he spots him. You know, I mean, maybe somebody told him. I don't know what it is, and he, you know, whatever it was. I guess he recognizes Frank Shamrock immediately, right? And I don't know if somebody says something. I don't know what's going on. And he tells Vince, and he goes, you know, like Mickey brought these guys in, and you know he explains. I mean, whatever is told, I forget it. It's all in the book. But anyway, so he's telling Vince, and Vince looks at the guys, and then he sees Frank. And he doesn't know who Frank is, and he goes, "The midget."
With the braces.
Yeah. So he goes. So he's just like laughing at the whole idea, and then Jericho goes, "Okay, Vince, if something happens that goes wrong and they hit the ring," he goes, I got Mickey, and you get the midget."
The midget. There go those quads again.
Yeah, and then Vince is just like, "Yeah, no problem." Well, of course, there's no problem or anything like that. But it's so funny because it's like this whole weekend, I'm getting like texts from people in WWE. "Oh my God, Frank Shamrock's here to like shoot on somebody," and Mickey brought him in his muscle, and Frank Shamrock's here. And meanwhile, I mean, that is what he's there for. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's like I'm, because I'm hearing from Frank, and it's like, is he looking for a fight? He's got. Meanwhile, I mean, that is what he's there for. You know what I mean? But I mean, it's like I'm, because I'm hearing from Frank, and it's like, is he looking for a fight? He's got to fight Nick Diaz, and it was like 6 days later. He wasn't looking for a fight. He was, but I mean, if there was going to be a fight, yeah, he'd have fought.
If Mickey wasn't scared, he probably wouldn't have been there.
I mean, it's like, I mean, Chris Jericho wasn't going to double cross him. I mean, I'm getting this from both sides while this whole thing is going on all weekend, not all weekend, but that whole day, about like all the stuff that's oh my God, Frank Shamrock's here as a shooter. Oh my God, this is from WWE. What the hell? And it's just like, don't worry. It was so much paranoia on both sides, and everyone was freaking out. And I guess it made for a great story in Jericho's book. And Jericho finally talks to Mickey and explains the whole thing. And Mickey goes, "You mean you were working in that interview with Larry King?"
Blown away. He gives him props for being that good.
Oh yeah, he goes, "Oh my God!" And like Jericho goes, like this guy's about to win an Academy Award, and I flipped him.
Andy Kaufman, he was not, as far as a foil to a working pro wrestler. I mean, this guy just did not get it.
Yeah.
But what they ended up doing with Chris on the show, instead of a Mickey Rourke match, is he works Roddy Piper, Ricky Steamboat, and Jimmy Snuka. Now, Steamboat's strictly notable because he really hadn't worked since retiring from the business. Piper and Snuka still would do indie dates here and there, though Piper not in recent years. But Steamboat, what compelled him, Dave, to come back into the ring after all that time and work Jericho here at WrestleMania 25?
That was Jericho. Because Jericho, so Jericho, he doesn't have the match with Mickey. So Vince comes up with the idea of, you're going to fight 3 Hall of Famers. And he wanted, for whatever reason, Vince got it asphyxiated. But he wanted to be 3 Hall of Famers who were on the first WrestleMania.
Uh-huh.
Okay? That was the idea. They had to have been on the first WrestleMania. So Vince, at first, Jericho is fighting and going like, "Oh my God, I can't do anything with Piper. I can't do anything with Snuka." And the third guy was Greg Valentine. So that was the original idea.
Did it have Bundy's number?
I don't. So Jericho was just like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna nobody wants to go in WrestleMania and have a crappy match. Right. Least of all Chris Jericho, right?" And it's just like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna go at WrestleMania. We're gonna have this crappy match, and then Mickey Rourke's gonna knock me out."
Or Shamrock or something.
Well, this is before weeks before they knew about Shamrock. So Jericho comes in and just goes, "God, what am I gonna do?" He goes to Vince. He goes, "Vince, I got this great idea." And if you remember on the TV, they actually started teasing this a little bit. He goes, "How about Lawler?" And Vince is like, "But he wasn't at the first WrestleMania." Because Jericho had never worked with, but Lawler could still go at that point, and it would have been great. And plus, he was at the first WrestleMania. It's like, what does that have to do with anything?
These are the rules.
But it's like, it was a secret rule. It's not like they went in there and go, Chris Jericho will face 3 guys from the first WrestleMania. Vince just made up this thing in his head that it's got to be from the first WrestleMania. So Jericho's looking. It's just like, oh my God. And he sees Steamboat. Well, Ricky Steamboat is Chris Jericho's idol. I don't know if you know that or not. And he never wrestled Ricky Steamboat. I mean, he was just starting out when Ricky Steamboat back went out and Ricky had to retire. But Ricky was training guys, and he was in the ring, and he was in reasonably good shape. He was, like 54 years old, something like that. So Jericho, comes up with, what about Steamboat? Kind of thinking. So I hear it's Steamboat. So I remember at that time, I talked to Flair. I think when it first came out, and I go, and I know Flair and Steamboat are friends, and I go, so Rick, I'm kind of worried. I don't want to see, I haven't seen Ricky Steamboat wrestle in whatever it was, 13, 14 years. And I've never seen Ricky Steamboat in a bad match in my life. And it's like, and he goes, don't worry, Dave, because he's better than anyone in the company.
Was that right? And he was.
And I go, than anyone? And he goes, well, maybe not Shawn Michaels.
Right. You get my point.
but it's like, don't worry about it. So he's in there, and I actually thought that the match they had a month later, the straight singles match with Ricky Steamboat and Chris Jericho, was actually better than the Mania match. But the Mania match, because it was Mania, is the one that everyone remembers. But Ricky Steamboat was out there, and he was great. I mean, it was amazing how good he was, and the match was saved, and then they did the angle.
And finally, here on WrestleMania 25, front runner. One of the top candidates for greatest match in WrestleMania history is The Undertaker and Shawn Michaels have a 30-minute blowout classic, and sort of unexpected in that it certainly was built up as a big match on the show, but by the end of the show, it was by far the most memorable thing that had happened. The Triple H Orton main event was pretty flat for the championship. Cena worked Edge and Big Show in a triple threat, so that was kind of confusing and crowded of a match, but why was this match so great? Your memories of Undertaker and Shawn Michaels, I feel like...
It was so great. I mean, I think that match and the Austin and Bret Hart match in 97 are the 2 best matches in the history of WrestleMania. Mm-hmm. I think that the Bret Hart, the Chris Benoit, Triple H, Shawn Michaels match where Benoit won, I think that's pretty close, but I would say that this one's number 2. Michaels and Undertaker, whenever they worked, they did have a magic between them. I think there was a certain level of respect for each other. Michaels is phenomenal anyway. Undertaker is a great big match wrestler. It's his stage. When you wrestle Undertaker WrestleMania, it always feels like a bigger match. So it's a great advantage to be able to do it, and also it's a great advantage to have carte blanche and you can go as long as you want, because they weren't on last. Which a lot of people think, they should have been on last. You know what? If they were on last, all these guys would have gone long, and they would have probably had 10 minutes cut off their match. And don't get me wrong, it probably still would have been an absolutely fantastic match, but it wouldn't be as good as it was. So it was beneficial they didn't go on last. But it's just an incredible match. There's an Angle Shawn Michaels match also. I think that was probably up there as far as WrestleMania's greatest matches. But and again, then the next year's match was awfully good too. But it was just what do you say? It was just we're watching it, and it was a match where you go like, this match is just freaking incredible.
It's The Undertaker, Dave, versus Shawn Michaels in a rematch from the year prior at WrestleMania. This time, it's put in the show-closing position as Shawn Michaels' retirement match in accordance with his being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So they heap all the stakes they can on this match. They go out there and do all sorts of things to try to improve on the match the year before. But I'm not so sure it did it. Is this match better than 25 or not?
I like 25 slightly better, but this match was phenomenal as well. It was right up there. It was right up there.
What did you think about Shawn Michaels' retirement? We talked about Ric Flair's retirement at WrestleMania 24 and the circumstances. Was this a Shawn Michaels call, or was this like Flair where it was WWE?
This was a Shawn Michaels call 100%. I don't think that they wanted him to retire, which is funny because year earlier. I think, you know what I think that what it was? For years, Shawn Michaels was always like where he would slow down, but he wanted to work WrestleMania as long as he was physically able, kind of like what Undertaker ended up doing. You know, where he was basically retired for years, but every year at WrestleMania he would come back. And then I think it was the Ric Flair thing, and what the Ric Flair thing was, because he was in the ring, where I think that changed his mind, and it was just like, I'm going to be a man of my word. And it became so important because you know that every single year they're going, you know, no matter what they're going at WrestleMania, because, you know, Shawn, he's Mr. WrestleMania. And you know, like, there's just like, there's always something he could do. There's always a new match. There's all these guys. It's WrestleMania. We always need help, right? And you know, I think it's pretty adamant, you know, especially when he didn't work with Daniel Bryan after they did that thing. I think that at that point, I think everyone's pretty much convinced that, you know, I don't want to say never, because whenever you say never in wrestling, you're always wrong, but I think he's pretty darn adamant. And you know, whenever they do the one more match thing, I mean, he always shuts it down. It's not even like, well, maybe, or do the, you know, like even with Austin, who always go, well, you never say never.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, with Shawn, it's just like, it's, you know, even though I don't think Austin's going to wrestle either, he may, but I don't think so. But with Shawn, it's just like, it's just completely shut down. Like, he's not going to do it.
And the closing scene of this year's WrestleMania is an interesting one. It's Michaels saying goodbye, Taker kind of rolling away, and for Michaels, it's interesting because he had been the big match performer before he went down with his back injury in 1998. I mean, he had these blowout WrestleMania performances. He had the ladder match. He had the Iron Man match. But I think it was this run, Dave, this return from the back injury, that not only cemented Shawn Michaels as Mr. WrestleMania, but I think cemented him as an all-time great. I wonder if it wasn't for the Jericho, the Angle, the Undertaker matches at WrestleMania, if Shawn Michaels is remembered as such a surefire, all-time, absolute, no question great. I mean, was this second run important to his legacy in that way?
I think more important than the first in some ways. I mean, he had more great matches in the first one because the second one he was a part-time guy, and he was younger, and he wasn't as hurt and all that. But there were always the questions with Shawn Michaels in the first run, and
it was controversial whether he was a Hall of Famer as far as the Observer Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was absolutely. It was very controversial. I thought he was, but a lot of people thought he wasn't. And by the, you know, but if you go now at the end, you know, people will now look back in hindsight and go, how was he not a first ballot Hall of Famer? Yep. And it's like, well, you know, I mean, if you look in that, when you know, when the first year he was on and the first couple of years he was on, I mean, I voted for him every year, but it wasn't like it's a slam dunk, and it wasn't like I was mad at people like, how could you, you know, not? It was like, there was enough baggage on the other end. The second run, you know, there really wasn't that much in the way of baggage on him. He was professional. He put people over, and all that. You know, and it was just, and in other ways, you know, I mean, he was not the athletic worker he was, but mentally, you know, and perhaps, you know, the drug, you know, the not having the drug issue, but whatever it was, mentally he was far better. He was a far better promo the second time around. And when he retired on this show, you know, yeah, he's an all, you know, he's a no-brainer all-time great. And I mean, you got to say, if you're talking about from a North American standpoint, the greatest wrestlers of the last 50 years, you can't have the discussion without him being one of those 3 or 4 names, like a Ric Flair and some of the others. You know, I mean, he is in that discussion, you know, for the top spot.
Why do you think Michaels chose to retire at the hands of The Undertaker instead of, say, Triple H?
He'd wrestled Triple H a million times. For one thing, I think that it was just the time. I think he had that great match the year before. I think he felt it was time, and it made sense to do a rematch after that great match.
Now, this show represents, I think, one of the colossal failures in WWE history in terms of a ready-made match that they destroy by Showtime. They just take something that's handed to them on a silver platter, you just have to warm it up in the microwave, and you've got yourself a money match. But they got too creative for their own good, as they're wont to do. And by the time, if you can believe it, Bret Hart gets into the ring with Vince McMahon this year at WrestleMania, it means hardly anything. But let's push it back to January 4th of this year. Bret Hart, who hadn't been, with the exception of being inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2006, really anywhere near the WWE because of the Montreal Screwjob, parts the curtain, confronts Shawn Michaels in the middle of the ring, reconciles, and it felt tremendous. Go back to January 4th, that day, and how momentous it felt that loop had been closed and Bret was back.
You know what's funny is if Bret and Vince wrestled in February, I mean, it wouldn't have been as big as WrestleMania because it wasn't WrestleMania, but that match would have been 5 times
absolutely
as it was. Every week they did television, they made it worse and worse. This was something that it's like it was funny because when they did it, all I could think of is like every angle they do will make this worse because it's one of those things where the people already have their angle. You know, when Bret, and again, people will go, oh, you know, it's new generation, this, and this. All I know is that January the 4th, and even before January the 4th, when the rumors were out, there was UFC, whatever was it, probably the Saturday before the Monday, okay? Yeah. And I'm backstage. I think it's Vegas. Is it Frankie and Gray? I don't even remember which match.
Yeah, would have been.
Yep. Okay. So I'm backstage. That was a phenomenal match too. Yeah. But so I'm backstage, and it's just like everyone is just like, oh my God, Bret's coming Monday. It was like this is it was like a big thing. Bret Hart coming back to Raw after all of these years, and they even told you ahead of time. Imagine that.
Mm-hmm. And they had TNA coming back at him that night. So
yeah, because they had Hogan and Flair debuting on TNA at the same time, and Jeff Hardy and Rob Van Dam as well. So it's like, can you imagine you actually advertise something? You know what I mean? And so that was like a gigantic wrestling day. But Bret Hart's coming to Raw was bigger than Hogan and Flair and TNA. And Hogan and Flair are like the 2 biggest stars of the last 30 years in some ways. And there's Bret, but it's Bret and Raw and the history. It was really big. And
what did you think of the face-to-face with Shawn? What did you think of the way that played out that night in the ring?
You know what? It was what Bret wanted. I mean, there was, you could look at it in another way in the sense that, my God, there was so much money in Bret and Shawn, but, Bret couldn't do a match. That was the problem. I mean, in the end of the day, he couldn't do a match. And with Vince, if he couldn't do a match, there's stuff you could do, and it's okay. With Shawn, you know what I mean? Like with Shawn, it's like there has to be like a great match. And, and Shawn was retired anyway. There's other things you could do. But since the idea was the matches with Vince, you're not going to ever do a match with Shawn. Let's do the makeup, and then all the heat's on Vince, and then that was the way they did it. Whatever. I don't know if I would have done it that way, but that was their decision. My feeling in hindsight is that, and I don't know why this never happened. They have that movie Wrestling with Shadows, which we've all seen, and it's the greatest build. I think all Vince should have done is gone to USA and just gone the Monday before WrestleMania at 11 o'clock, or maybe just on a prime time at 9 o'clock on one night. Look, if you put that movie on, it's not going to do bad ratings, on television anyway. It hasn't been on in years and years. And if it's at 11, who cares what the ratings are anyway? Because you put Wrestling with Shadows on after Raw, it sure as hell going to beat whatever they were putting on at 11 that night. You know what I mean? And I have no idea what it was, but because the Raw viewers are going to stick to watch it. So you seem like such a simple idea. Just do verbal back and forth, serious interviews on both sides. Tell people the story, regurgitate the story, show the movie. Everyone sees the movie, and do the match. Instead, they decided to do low blows, and they decided to have car wrecks and all of these things that, by the time they got there, it was just another match that people really weren't that invested in. And this WrestleMania, as far as when we talk about like the business of WrestleMania, who would have thought that out of the last, whatever it is, the last several years, that the Bret Hart Vince McMahon WrestleMania, if you would have said in 2005, in the next 10 years, we're going to have 10 WrestleManias. And we're going to bring back Vince. We're going to have a Vince McMahon Bret Hart match at one of them. And that's going to do the worst business of the 10. Well, would you ever think that's even possible?
No. I mean, it's certainly, if they just had 2 months to ruin it